Good morning. We are on Havdala Amud Aleph 104a. We have a couple more passages in the Gemara regarding the text of Havdala. And then we're going to go to the Shulchan Aruch discussing the text of the Haggadah, specifically the text of, I keep on saying Haggadah, Havdala, the text of Havdala, specifically as it relates to making Havdala on the first night of the Seder, if the first night was Saturday night, right? The Yak Nahaz, that whole business with the combination of Kiddush and Havdala. We're going to get to the text of Havdala from Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll get back to the Gemara, where the Gemara gets back to its discussion on what happens when a person is eating Friday afternoon and Shabbos happens in the middle, covers the bread, makes Kiddush in the middle of his meal. We're going to get to the details of that after we conclude the text of Havdala. So in yesterday's Gemara, the Gemara gave us a list of distinctions that are made reference to in the Torah. Right? The word Havdala means separation, distinction. Right? We're making Havdala means we're making a distinction, a separation between Shabbos and the weekday, thanking Hashem for that distinction. And we were told earlier that if you want to be minimalist and keep your Havdala as short as possible, then you can make mention of three distinctions, which is what we do. Between the holy and the mundane, but between darkness and light, and Ben Yisrael between the Jew and the nation of the world. Those are the three distinctions we make reference to in our Havdala service. But the Gemara also told us that if you want to increase and make mention of more distinctions, you can go up to 7. And the Gemara yesterday told us a whole list of distinctions that one can declare going up to 7. And they were all distinctions, Havdalas, distinctions, separations that were cited to in the Torah, between Cohen and Levi, between Levi and the Jewish people, between what do we have? Between the whole the pure and the impure, and aside from the other ones we had before, between the holy and the mundane, between light and darkness, and so on. Now that text, that Mishnaic text, which the Gemara cited to, which listed all of these different distinctions that one can make reference to in his Havdala, that text concluded with 2 variants on how someone would conclude the bracha, right? So remember the formulation of the bracha. The bracha begins with Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you God our Lord, King of the universe, and then you say the content of the blessing, and then you conclude with Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you God, and then encapsulate the blessing in 2 words. And that's how blessings are often structured. We have that in Shemona Esrei as well. The content of the blessing, that's a paragraph or so, and then the conclusion, that one little line, blessed are you God our Lord, healer of the sick, whatever the encapsulation is. In a more long version, you have it after Yishtabach. The bracha, 2 brachas just before Shema. You start Baruch Atah Hashem, the one who forms Yetzirah, forms light and creates darkness, right after Yishtabach. That begins a bracha. And then there's like 3 or 4 paragraphs, all still the content of the blessing, which describes the angels, Kadosh, Kadosh, and then concludes, Baruch Atah Hashem, Baruch Hashem, the one who forms the light. Blessed you God our Lord, who forms the light. That re-encapsulates the essence of the blessing, even though you had 3 paragraphs talking about angels and all kinds of elaborate stuff. So it's the opening and the closing, right? So the Gemara, that text, which gave us a list of how much you can put into that content, 7 different distinctions that you want, you can add to this lengthy content. Then you come to Baruch Atah Hashem in your final conclusion. We say, Baruch Atah Hashem, blessed are you, God, the one who distinguishes between the holy and the mundane. That's how we say it. But the text that we cited to didn't say either of those. Give 2 other options. One is Mekadesh Yisrael, the one who sanctifies Israel. And the other is Seder Bereshis. You conclude by saying, thank you, blessed are you God, who brings order and structure to creation. As the Rashbam explained it, we're coming from Motzei Shabbos, Saturday night. So, and we're mirroring the week of creation. So as Hashem concludes creation on 7 days, Shabbos is over, now begins the structure of creation. So you say, blessed are you God, our Lord, the one who brings order to creation. You made all these distinctions in 7 days, and now we have order in creation. or the other one which said, Mekadesh Yisrael, blessed are you God who sanctifies Israel. What we're saying here is, in this whole system of creation, which there are various different distinctions and gradations of levels, you chose the Jew and put him at the holy top. That's the two variants that text cited to. Now, neither of those is what we do, right? We say, Baruch HaMavdil HaKadosh, the one who distinguishes between the holy and the mundane. So where'd that come from? That's what we're going to read right now. Yeah? What do you want to say?
So that the world was technically started on Motzei Shabbat?
The natural order as we know it, yes. Because still then God was still in the process of creating. Right? So on the first Thursday of the world, we still didn't have animals. Right? Because animals were only created on Friday.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So on the first Wednesday, we still didn't have what was Thursday. Thursday was plants, right? I think. I don't remember the order of creation. But the first structured week with everything in it started on Saturday night after Shabbos, once everything is done. Okay, so now the Gemara goes to, so we are 1, 2, 3, 4 lines at the bottom of the page. My chassan. So how should we conclude our Havdala? What should be the little encapsulated phrase that comes at the end? Blessed are you God, what should be the phrase? Because we had two options in the text we cited to. Either Mekadesh Yisrael, the one who sanctifies Israel as the pinnacle of creation, or the one who brings order to creation, having now described and concluded the week of creation. So the Gemara therefore says, Rav says, Mekadesh Yisrael. Rav's opinion is to follow one of the two views mentioned in the text yesterday. Namely, you should say, blessed are you, the one who sanctifies Israel. That's how we should conclude our Havdala. Of course, we all know that we don't do that. Shmuel says, and this is who we do follow, Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chol. We conclude by saying, blessed are you, God, the one who distinguishes between the holy and the mundane. Okay. Now, our Gemara does not tell us where Shmuel came to his opinion. How did he come to this conclusion? Let's remember, Rav and Shmuel are the second generation of the Gemara's era. We cited to a text of the Mishnaic era. Scholars of the Gemara's era cannot, way after, within a century, but still decades later, let's say, they cannot undermine that which the previous generation has concluded. Right? We discussed this the other day, that every generation must accept the conclusions of the previous generation is axiomatic. So how could Shmuel come along and change the text? So explains Rashbam. There's a Gemara elsewhere. The Gemara elsewhere says that when Yom Tif is Saturday night, right? Your Seder, let's say, is Saturday night, and you're making Havdala in your Kiddush, right? You're making a Kiddush accepting the Yom Tif and making Havdala closing out the Shabbos. So the text over there in that Gemara in Chulin, in a different tractate, says that on Saturday night when you make Havdala, you should say, blessed are you, Baruch Atah Hashem, Hamavdil, who distinguishes between Kodesh LaKodesh, between one holy and another holy. The holy day of Shabbos and the holy day of Yom Tif. So we can derive from there that if, when you're going from Saturday night into Yom Tif, you say thank you for the one who distinguishes between holy and holy, then you can derive that opinion would say that when you're going from Shabbos into weekday, you should say thank you for distinguishing between the holy and the mundane, because you're going from holy to mundane. So it's not explicit in the Mishnaic text, it's implicit. But not in the Mishnaic text that we quoted yesterday. In the Mishnaic text in Chulin, where there it said that on Saturday night, you're making Havdala going to Yom Tif, you say thank you for distinguishing between holy and holy. Derive from there that if you're going from holy to weekday, you would say thank you for distinguishing between holy and weekday. And that's where Shmuel gets his view. So it's a derivative of the Mishnaic era, but not explicit in the Mishnaic era. And we actually go with this one, as we'll see in a moment. Yeah?
That's when we do the Havdala.
Yeah.
And then we do that other insert that we saw for Pesach Yom Tif.
That insert is Havdala. We do Kiddush first, you mean? Because you're taking on Yom Tif, and then the insert is Havdala, in which you say thank you for distinguishing between one holy and another holy, between the holy day of Yom Tif.
You don't have to do the regular Havdala, right?
No, the Havdala is inserted into your Kiddush. Right? That's what we discussed earlier. Yakna has this whole formula of what's the order of all the blessings, considering that you have to do Kiddush and Havdala. Right? We discussed this a couple of weeks ago. Remember that? Havdala is inserted into the Kiddush. If you're holding a cup once and you make Havdala and Kiddush and holding one cup. Mm-hmm. Right?
So we don't have to do Havdala.
No, that is Havdala. That is Havdala. Not you don't have to make Havdala. That is Havdala. Havdala is a blessing distinguishing, and we're making that blessing just as we make Kiddush holding the same cup of wine.
So
right?
Do the regular Havdala.
The text is almost the exact same, because it's just a question of holding a separate cup or not. And the answer is we're not holding a separate cup, we're holding one cup. Yeah. We discussed this about way back. Right? Even though usually we don't like to combine mitzvahs, over here we do, because Kiddush and Havdala share content. We discussed this way back. Yeah, so that's Havdala. Havdala is that blessing that's inserted into the Kiddush. Mm-hmm. That is Havdala, in which we say thank Hashem for distinguishing between one holy day and another holy day, Shabbos and Yom Tov. So deriving from that, we can say, if you thank Hashem from going Shabbos to Yom Tov, thank you for distinguishing between one holy day and another, then we can derive, says Shmuel, that if it comes from Shabbos to weekday, we say thank you for distinguishing between holy and mundane. That's it. Even though the text yesterday said that on a Saturday night, you would say thank you for making the Jews holy, thank you for bringing order to creation, but we reject both of those. And we go with the derivative view, thank you for distinguishing between holy and mundane. Yeah.
But how does that derivative view take like priority? And
Good
what were
question.
people doing before
So
that it happened that it was all it?
I would imagine. So again, this is before the Siddur is officially
Right.
structurized.
Yeah.
At least the text isn't formalized.
Yeah.
The structure is there. So I imagine some communities did Mekadesh Yisrael, some communities did Seder Bereshis, and the other one, some said this way. I imagine that's how it was. If you want to imagine it to make it not sound so strange, I used this example the other day. The Chabad and the Sephardim, we say Haidu and then Baruch Shema in the morning. Ashkenazim say Baruch Shema and then afterwards Haidu. We say we don't lose our minds over that. Okay, so they have a different text. So back then, it's okay. So this guy's house he does Mekadesh Yisrael, this guy's house he does Baruch whatever. There were certain times when customs became so strikingly distinct, especially between the houses of Shammai and Hillel, that it led to controversy and even sometimes to really big controversy. And the sages have to come in and say, okay, we're following Hillel only exclusively. But even so, it took time till all the communities adopted that, right? So this is more complicated when it comes to like those kinds of things. Like for example, imagine some houses are lighting the menorah 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and others are doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You walk down the street, you see menorah with 5, and the next door it's very confusing. That's right. But here it's a subtle change in the text of the Siddur. Okay, so if this community had that, and then it took time till there's a centralized community that was adopted, and once the centralized custom is adopted, that becomes the accepted practice, right? Halacha actually is determined more than by rabbinic enactment. It's more determined, by the way, by Jewish acceptance of the practice. Correct. Rambam speaks about this a few times. Like he'll say something like the rabbis of the previous generation, some of the rabbis of the previous generation said we should do X. It was not adopted by all communities, and therefore you're not obligated to follow it. Or then he'll say this institution was adopted by a number of rabbis. It's been slowly expanded throughout all the Jewish communities, and therefore everybody should do it.
Doesn't that happen also like a few times in the Shulchan Aruch of the Rebbe? We see like
well, we'll say there's halach. Listen, but the community. That's right. That's right. So over time, there's the split between Ashkenazi and Sephardi came around. Okay, when we get to our series on the history of halacha, we'll discuss this at length.
Talk about the Rambam. The Chayinu this week discusses or talks about making of tefillin and making of mezuzah.
Yes, one chapter a day. Yeah,
it's very interesting.
One chapter a day. Yeah. Okay. So how do we come to this conclusion? So again, we have really 3 variants of how a person should conclude his Havdala. 2 of them cited to in the Mishnah text. One is Mekadesh Yisrael, blessed are you who sanctifies Israel. Version A, which Rav says to adopt. Version B says, blessed are you, the one who brings order to creation. That was in the Mishnaic era. But we have no record of the Gemara's era adopting that. And then finally, version 3, Shmuel's version, which says, you conclude by saying, blessed are you, God, who separates between holy and the mundane, which is what we practice. The Gemara tells us the evolution of how that came about. So Rav and Shmuel, as I mentioned, are in the 2nd generation of the Gemara's era. And at that point, clearly, there's still 2 different practices. Because Rav says, and I imagine his students would follow him, they would say, at the end of Havdala, they would say, blessed are you, God, who sanctifies Israel. And Shmuel's followers would say, blessed are you, God, who distinguishes between the holy and the mundane. So clearly at that point, 2nd generation of the Gemara's era, there were still 2 different practices. But go forward a little bit in the Gemara's era, another generation or 2, actually not that far, only 1 generation later, and go to Abaye. Says the Gemara. Layet Allah Abaye. Abaye would literally he would curse. The Itema others say it wasn't Abaye who was doing this cursing, but rather of Yosef. Rav Yosef would curse is not a good word. It's maybe like speak disparagingly or tell someone off. That's also not such a nice way of saying it. But he would make it clear this is incorrect. For someone, the Rav who would follow Rav. So if he saw someone saying, Mekadesh Yisrael, blessed are you, God, who sanctifies Israel, he would tell them, no, you're doing it wrong. So clearly in the generation after Rav and Shmuel, Abaye took it into his hands. Abaye, who was adopted by Rav, by Shmuel. Right, my mind. Abaye was adopted by one of these scholars. By Rabba? Okay. Not my head. Anyway, Abaye, which is the next generation, he obviously took it upon himself to say, okay, we're making a uniform custom, and the uniform custom is going to be as we practice, which is thank you, and make to the Mavdala Kadosh, making the distinction between the holy and mundane. And therefore, if he saw someone doing it the other way, he would say, guys, you're doing it wrong. So here you can kind of get a window as to how this practice has evolved. In one generation, there's clearly two customs. In the next generation, someone comes along and says, we're making a uniform. And if you see someone not doing it uniformly, he would say, hey, you're doing it wrong. And this is not by the way, it's not an uncommon description in the Gemara, where you'll have a sage who takes it upon himself to bring uniformity to the practice, and someone who wasn't behaving that way, he would say, guys, you're causing division amongst Israel. Stick to the text that we all accept. So it's either Abaye or Rav Yosef who took it upon themselves to do this. The Gemara introduces another possibility and then rejects it, namely, Tana Mishmeit Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya. The following was taught in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, son of Chananya, who said, quote, anyone who decides, you know what, I don't want to get into the dispute between Rav and Shmuel, I'll just do both. I'll say, thank you, blessed are you, God our Lord, who sanctifies Israel and distinguishes between the holy and the mundane. Instead of choosing one side or the other, I'll combine both. Said Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, if he does this, his days and his years are lengthened. God will grant him long life. I guess for staying out of dispute and combining both, good for you. To which the Gemara says, the Allah does not follow this practice. You got to pick a side. No, actually, that's not the reason. The reason that Rashbam tells us is because we have a principle elsewhere in the Gemara that one does not conclude a blessing with two ideas. The whole point of that conclusion, as I mentioned before, is to give a two-word encapsulation of the blessing. You cannot have a two-word encapsulation of the blessing that's two different things. That's the whole point of an essence of something, that it's singular. So if you're coming to the conclusion, so in the content itself, and you want to go on a tangent to describe other things, good, go on a tangent. But when you're coming to the end, blessed are you, God our Lord, who, the whole point is you got to get to the essence of it. And you can't have two essences. So you're trying to be nice and placate everybody, but you don't have anything in the end, which is a good lesson in life. You could be respectful to everybody's opinion, but know where you stand. You can't, you have to stand somewhere. You can't stand in two camps simultaneously and appease everyone, and then you have no one. Yeah, it's relevant to yesterday's Chumash, 2 days ago, 2 days ago Chumash, and coming up this week, right? The Torah tells us that Aaron passed away. What was the date? Yesterday's Chumash on Rosh Chodesh Av, right? The Torah tells us on the first day of the month of Av, on the first day of the fifth month, fifth being Av, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, right? The first day of the fifth month, Aaron passes away. The description of Aaron's death is earlier, but the date of Aaron's death is mentioned in yesterday's Chumash, 2 days ago Chumash, this week's parsha. So now the Chumash says that when Aaron passed away, everybody mourned him, right? Because he was the lover of peace and the pursuer of peace. Everybody mourned him. When it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, it doesn't say everybody mourned him. It doesn't say it. When it comes to Aaron, it says everybody mourned him. When it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, it doesn't say everybody mourned him. So my late uncle, Chaim Nu of Allah Shalom, who was a community activist and in some ways a leader and took on responsibilities in the community in Melbourne. So he once told me, I don't think it's his original vart, I don't think it's his original teaching, but he lived it, so he was able to share with me. And when he shared it with me, it had meaning because he actually lived it. He said, why is that? When Aaron passes away, everybody mourns him. Moshe Rabbeinu passes away, not everybody mourns him. What's going on?
You're a leader. Not everybody's gonna like it.
Exactly. So when you're Aaron, and you're not the actual leader, you don't take responsibility for decisions. You can be the nice guy. And when something goes wrong, when people challenged Aaron's position, what did he do? He sent them to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu had to step in and defend his position. So it's easy to have easy. It's easier to have everybody love you. But when you're in a position of leadership, sometimes you're gonna have to come to conclusions that are not going to be
Nice.
right. You can't make conclusions that everybody's going to like. And I think that's the Gemara is telling us here. When you get to the essence of the bracha at the end, at the beginning, and you want to consider things, you can consider everything. Consider everything when you want to, like a judge is writing an opinion. So in your opinion itself, you can say all kinds of things. When it comes to the end, bottom line, you can't have two different things. It's got to be one singular thing. And sometimes that one singular thing will discount some of the things you described earlier because you were considering something and you went back and forth and whatever. You can go through all kinds of things. Comes to the essence conclusion, it's got to be one and singular. And I think that's what the Gemara is telling us here, that we can't have this hybrid. And the conclusion the Gemara comes to is, as Shmuel's opinion is, you should say, blessed are you, the one who distinguishes between the holy and the mundane, as we do till this day. Yeah, what do you want to say? Yeah, sorry. Okay, one more story and then we'll close with that and we'll continue on Monday. The Gemara tells us a little story like this. This is an interesting story. Ula Iklala Pumpadisa. Ula, one of the great scholars of the Gemara's era, arrived in the town of Pumpadisa. I mentioned this before. Pumpadisa is one of the big cities of centers of Torah learning in Babylonia at this time. There were a few cities like this, and Pumpadisa was one of the big ones. So Ula didn't live in Pumpadisa, but he came to Pumpadisa. It's on the river there. What's the river that goes to Babylonia?
Euphrates?
Euphrates?
Tigris?
Or Tigris River? Tigris? Euphrates. One of those rivers is dotted with a bunch of towns, and those are the cities that were like the big cities of Jewish scholarship at the time. So Pumpadisa is one of them. So Ula arrives in Pumpadisa. So it's an exciting thing. There's a great scholar in town. Everybody wants to go learn from him, watch him, to observe him, see what he does. So Amalei Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yitzchak Berei. Rabbi Yehuda tells his son, Rabbi Yitzchak, Zil go, amatilil kalkala de pere, and go bring a basket of fruit to Ula. But the bringing a basket of fruit is a ruse. It's just a way to get into the house because I want you to observe something. The chazi, and go observe, heichi ivdil. How does he make Havdala? I want to know how he does it. I want to know. There's obviously discussion. You can clearly see there's a discussion and debate amongst the communities and families and scholars as to what should be the text. This is still an ongoing debate, right? As we can see. So he says, Rabbi Yehuda tells the son of Yitzchak, go bring a basket of fruit. It's all nice and dandy. And then watch him make Havdala and let me know what he does. Loy Azal. Rabbi Yitzchak didn't go. And Shadar Leila Abaye. Instead, he sent Abaye. Abaye, the one we mentioned earlier, who took it upon himself to make uniform custom. He was sent, Rabbi Yitzchak sent Abaye instead of going himself as his father instructed. This is before Abaye decided to take it upon himself to make it uniform while he's still a younger student. So this is a little earlier. So it's while the controversy still exists before it's become uniform. Okay, so Abaye took it upon himself to do it, brought the fruit. So Kiyasa Abaye, so when Abaye came back, after successfully doing this whole thing, brought a basket of fruit, watched Havdala, came back to report to Rabbi Yehuda, who's then going to report to his father Rabbi Yitzchak. So Amalei, so Rabbi Yitzchak, the father, said to his son Rabbi Yehuda, all the way around, sorry. Rabbi Yehuda, the father, said to his son Rabbi Yitzchak, Heichi Omer, what did Ula say? What did the 16 guests say? Amalei, I'm sorry, Abaye is now speaking to the son of Yitzchak and says, here's what he said. He said, Baruch HaMavda M'Kodesh L'Chol, blessed is the one who distinguishes between the holy and the mundane. Omar, that's what he said. V'su loya, no more. So you see, Abaye sees Ula do it that way. This, I would imagine, would give Ula more confidence to actually bring uniform later in his life to doing it this way. Blessed are you who makes the distinction between the holy and the mundane. Because he actually saw Ula practice it that way. But he didn't say anything else, actually, which means even less than us. We start off, blessed are you, God, our Lord, King of the universe, and then we make 3 distinctions, and then we say, blessed are you, God, our Lord, who makes a distinction between the holy and the mundane. He didn't say any of that. He just said one line, blessed are you, God, our Lord, who makes a distinction between the holy and the mundane. That's it. That was his whole Havdala. Meaning along with the bracha on the wine, and along with the psalmim, and along with the candle. But the Havdala bracha was only that line. That's all he said. Okay, so Rabbi Yitzchak now reports back to his father. Also, like Rabbi Yitzchak goes back to his father. Amarle, and the father asks him, Rabbi Yehuda asks his son Rabbi Yitzchak, Heichi Amar, what did Ula say? Amarle, so Rabbi Yitzchak is honest and says, look, Anoloy Ozli. I didn't end up going myself. Anoshidarte la Abaye. I sent Abaye instead as a young student. V'amarlin, and Abaye told me that Ula said, blessed is the one who makes a distinction between the holy and mundane, and that's it. Yehuda, the father, is upset at the son of Yitzchak for failing to follow instruction. Amalei, so the father says to the son of Yehuda, says to the son of Yitzchak, Rav Rasuna Damar, the arrogance of master, he's referring to his son as master, or sir. The arrogance of sir, of master, Visarserusa Damar, and the anger of master, Garmale Lamar, caused to master that the teaching will not be said in your name. Had you gone to observe it, then you would have gone down in history as the one who brought the clarification of the custom. But because of your, he says, this is the way he phrases it in like this poetic kind of way, the arrogance of sir and the anger of sir caused it for sir that he lost that opportunity. End story. There's a lot to be learned from the story, and both from son to father and from father to son. From son to father, there's, you don't want to feel like your father's leper, your father's sending. He himself doesn't want to go to see Ula, so he's sending off his lackey. So I pass it on to another lackey. Don't be such a fool. Your father sees a little bit bigger than you, and maybe he's sending it off to you because he wants you to gain something, not just because he's pawning it off to you, but because he wants you to gain something. The father could have gone, and then he would have gone in the annals of history as the one who got the custom. But he wanted the son to have that merit and opportunity. But the son didn't see it that way. The son thought, oh, my father's sending me as a lackey. I'll send the other kid. And then from father to son the same way. As a father, you don't use your kid out because you're giving your kids opportunities, not using them out because you're lazy, so you send your son off. No, you want to give your kid the opportunity to learn something, to be part of something. So give him the opportunity to go somewhere. And then two things. Number one, when he tells his son off, he doesn't say the anger of my son or the arrogance of my son, the arrogance of sir. In other words, he's telling his son, in my eyes, you're a man of distinction. And I'm trying to give you space to become that man of distinction. Don't squander it. I'm telling you to go there because you're a mar, you're a sir, and I want you to grow into being sir. Here's another interesting component. The father didn't tell the son beforehand why I'm sending him. Didn't say, I'm sending you because I want you to go down in the annals of history as the one who didn't tell him that. Just said go. Why didn't he explain to him before?
Would have given an incentive.
Sorry?
Would have given his son a bit of incentive.
It would have given his son an incentive, but it would have robbed him of the opportunity of being a true student in humility. A true student in humility has to understand that his position as a student is to listen and learn and follow. Not everything has to be explained to you.
That's not Sibin Yishma, no?
It's correct. And that's how you truly gain distinction. You want to go down as a person who for generations is cited to as someone who brought custom to us. It's going to be happen by humility, not by standing on your high horse and saying, I need an explanation, otherwise I'm going to sending me as a lackey, I'll send my lackey off. No, it's not the way you learn, and it's not the way you grow. Your father gives you an instruction, he doesn't tell you why he's sending you. And that's part of the learning experience, to understand that when your father has a bigger picture, he sees farther, and when he asks you to do something, follow. Even though your father looks at you and says, you're a sir, calls his son sir, even as he tells him off. So many multiple layers of lessons that can be derived from this little encounter. So even though the son isn't in the annals of history as the one who formalized the custom, Abaye is, but he's still immortalized in the text in giving us the lesson in this whole story, because the story itself is recorded in the Talmud, not just the conclusion that Abaye brought from Ula.
Amazing story.
So it's a beautiful story.
It's an amazing experience.
Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you. Were you going to say something?
No, I'm saying that he also misses out on, like, if you know what you're going to get, you kind of miss out also on the scoop because you didn't.
That's right.
You did it with incentive.
That's right. That's right. If you give him the incentive, he would do it for selfish reasons and not do it for the right reason, which is my father asked me. That's why I'm doing it.
Exactly.
Which is the correct reason to do something.
It's also covered the
Yeah.
father.
Cover the father, cover the chachamim. But he has. Which also tells you that this idea of people having a chip on their shoulder because of their relationship with their father is not a new phenomenon. It's been going on since the Talmud. Clearly, the son, my father's sending me as a lackey. I don't want to go. I'll send somebody else. This whole chip on the shoulders. And if he just let go of it, he might grow.
Humility leads to open arrogance.
That's right. If he knew why he was going, he would think he's a whole. Just humbly accept, go. That's when you'll truly grow. That's when you'll be part of the.
Be applied also to everything.
Yeah,
in
absolutely
a lot of
everything.
relationships in like a boss and employee, or even partners, one will tell someone like just go do this, and the other one takes it like the
Personally,
way,
yeah.
and personal and
100%.
defensive, and this, and it was just an opportunity for you. What are you
100%.
talking about?
Even a good marriage.
100%.
Especially
Yeah.
for marriage.
And I think the key, a key to all of that is if each one believes that the other sees itself as Mara's sir, as a man of distinction. The father believes that a son is a man of distinction, and that's why I'm speaking to you this way. As soon as he feels like he's being, if the father starts to treat his son like a lackey, then there is a problem. Even when he tells his son off, he says Mar, calls him sir. Right. Yeah, that's what they're saying. Yeah.
That's actually very motivating.
Yeah.
Sometimes employees will start a weekend, they want to be the boss. Yes, you do this, do
Yeah.
it. And then do it.
Also from the employer's point of view, how to treat the employees.
Yeah. Okay, and so on Monday, God willing, there's one more little passage on the question of the text of the Havdala. A little discussion on the fact that we say "Blessed are you, God" twice, once at the beginning before we begin the whole content, and once at the end, as we described earlier, where we re-encapsulate. There's going to be a little discussion on that, and then when that's done, we'll go to the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, two sizable halachas, two sizable paragraphs in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, which gives us some of the halacha about the text of the Havdala. And then we'll get back after that on Tuesday, I guess, or Wednesday, we'll get back to the Gemara itself, which discusses making Kiddush mid-meal on Friday afternoon, right? When you're in the middle of your meal Friday afternoon and the sun sets and you have to make Kiddush, we'll get to that afterwards, which was the discussion we began with way back when.
This is also this amazing story with Rabbi Lau and the basketball player Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah, what?
What's the story?
That Rabbi Lau was telling us that story. He says Shaquille O'Neal when he
You heard this from Rabbi Levi when he came here.
no, I was at a JLI course and he was there.
Oh, okay.
And he gave a talk to just a group of us.
Mhm.
We were talking, and I'm going to tell you a story. He says you won't. And he related the story to us, and he said that Shaquille O'Neal, he didn't know Shaquille O'Neal, you know, he never met him. But when he retired from basketball, he wanted to tour the world. So he decided he's going to go to Egypt, and he's going to go here, and he's going to go to Israel, and he's going to go here, and he's going to go here. So Rabbi Lau said to him, he says, if you're going to go to Israel, no, I'm sorry. His father told him.
Whose father? The basketball player's father.
Basketball player's father. Okay. Basketball players. If you go to Israel, go see this Rabbi Lau. He's the head.
He's the chief rabbi at the time.
Chief
Yeah.
rabbi. He says, just go and make an appointment. Just go and walk into the office and say, I want to see Rabbi Lau. My name is Shaquille O'Neal, and they'll come right out. So he goes and he said, so I'm not going. Finally, he was in Israel. He said, I'm going to take a chance. He had some free time. So he walks into Rabbi Lau's
Office chamber.
No, not to the chamber. He walks in the building. A secretary there. And he says to her, my name is Shaquille O'Neal. And she says, so he says, I want to speak to Rabbi Lau. You can't speak to Rabbi Lau. He's a busy man. You have to make an appointment. He says, no, my father told me he'll come right out and see me. He said, I must see Rabbi Lau. So my father said. So she says, okay. He was insistent. So she goes in and Rabbi Lau walks right out, takes him, gives him a hug, takes him into his office. He sits down with him and Shaquille says, why here? He says, I want to tell you a story. He says, when I was in the campgrounds, Nazi campgrounds, he said, and the war was over, the Marines came to take us out, free us. And your father picked me up when I was a little kid,
Oh, wow.
took me on his shoulders, carried me out.
He was less than 10 years old. That's a wild story. That's a wild story. Wow. Yeah. Good day. Good job. Thank you for sharing that. That's a wonderful story.
Get very emotional.